In 1692 Massachusetts, standing accused in a courtroom came with a bizarre, fatal catch. If you fiercely maintained your innocence, you were hanged. If you confessed to the crime and implicated your neighbors, you lived. This structural incentive created a self-sustaining cycle of accusations, driving a systemic breakdown of the Massachusetts justice system, where the only path to safety was a lie. This stark, imposing colonial house reflects the harsh reality of living in a 17th-century Puritan settlement. By 1692, the Massachusetts Bay Colony was enduring freezing, brutal winters, constant threats from neighboring tribes, and the severe fallout of a recent smallpox epidemic. The Puritans looked out at the dense, untamed forests surrounding their towns and believed they were looking at the literal playground of the devil. To them, Satan was a physical entity actively plotting to destroy their holy experiment. Combine that deep-seated religious terror with agonizing physical hardships, and you get a community stretched to its absolute psychological breaking point. Long before anyone uttered the word witch, Salem was a powder keg waiting for a match. The match was struck in the home of the local minister, Reverend Samuel Parris. His 9-year-old daughter and 11-year-old niece suddenly began acting bizarrely, hiding under furniture, screaming gibberish, and violently convulsing on the floor. The local doctor, William Griggs, examined the contorting teenagers and found no biological explanation. Baffled, he delivered a terrifying 17th-century diagnosis. The girls were afflicted by the evil hand. Panic swept through the village. The local authorities immediately cornered the afflicted teenagers, demanding to know exactly who in the community was tormenting them with dark magic. Under immense pressure, the girls did exactly what a frightened teenager might do. They pointed their fingers at the people lowest on the social ladder. They accused a pair of homeless, impoverished women and an enslaved woman living in the Parris household named Tituba. Because the girls targeted marginalized outcasts whom no one was willing to defend, the powerful men of the town believed them instantly. Overnight, an unsolved medical mystery shifted into a legally sanctioned aggressive hunt for witches. During the initial public inquiries, the accused beggars fiercely denied having any connection to witchcraft, but their honest pleas fell on completely deaf ears, doing absolutely nothing to stop the enraged mob. Watching this unfold, Tituba realized the grim reality of her situation. If she followed suit and denied the charges, she would be tortured or hanged. Her only viable path to survival was to give the court exactly what it wanted, so Tituba confessed. She wove an elaborate horror story for the crowd, claiming a tall man from Boston forced her to sign the devil's book in blood, complete with invisible yellow birds and a talking dog. It was a brilliantly calculated move. Her vivid testimony perfectly confirmed the darkest suspicions of the Puritan judges, and in return for her cooperation, they spared her life. Tituba's success sent a clear signal to the young accusers. For the first time, these teenage girls saw the most powerful men in the colony hanging on their every word. Intoxicated by this newfound authority, they leveled up their targets. The girls moved straight past the homeless beggars and began accusing devout grandmothers and highly respected former ministers. The strict, oppressive social hierarchy of colonial America had completely inverted. The girls were able to take down these powerful community members because the court embraced a disastrous legal mechanic known as spectral evidence. Under this rule, a witch could send their invisible spirit out of their physical body. A defendant could stand motionless with hands tied, but the accusers could simply scream that an invisible ghost was choking them. Look at this publication by Cotton Mather. With backing from highly educated men like Mather, judges eagerly dismissed all traditional proof of innocence. Even flawless, pious behavior was thrown out and labeled as the devil trying to deceive the court. How do you establish an alibi against an invisible ghost? You can't. The court had constructed a system that mathematically guaranteed a death sentence for anyone telling the truth, while actively rewarding perjury and false accusations. But an 81-year-old farmer named Giles Corey recognized a specific legal technicality. He knew that if he stood trial and was found guilty, the government would confiscate his massive farm, leaving his children with nothing. To protect his family's land, he simply refused to enter a plea, utilizing the law's own requirements to stall the court process. To force a plea, The sheriff piled heavy stones on Corey's chest for 2 agonizing days. Staring death in the face, Corey refused to speak, rasping only 2 words: more weight. He was crushed to death, proving that the only way to defeat the perverse incentives of the court was to refuse to legitimize it with a plea. By the autumn of 1692, the accusers were drunk on their own power, but then they made a fatal miscalculation. They pointed their fingers at the wife of the colony's top executive, Governor William Phips. This portrait shows Governor Phips, the man who finally hit the brakes. He had allowed the trials to proceed when the victims were farmers and baiters, but the moment the danger reached the top of his own political hierarchy, he decisively intervened. Phips didn't just dissolve the Special Witchcraft Court, he executed a surgical legal maneuver. He officially banned the use of spectral evidence from any future courtroom proceedings. Without the admissibility of invisible ghosts as evidence, the prosecution's strategy instantly collapsed. This reversal showed that the crisis was ultimately driven by legal flaws rather than dark magic. By the time Phips emptied the freezing jails in May of 1693, the damage was catastrophic. 20 innocent people had been executed, and several more had died while rotting in their miserable cells. In the years that followed, intense societal guilt consumed the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Prominent judges publicly begged their congregations for forgiveness, and primary accusers openly admitted that their claims against innocent neighbors had been completely false. The Salem Witch Trials show us exactly what happens when extreme public paranoia is legitimized and weaponized by a broken justice system. We remember the horrifying events of 1692 because of this specific legal failure. It is the exact reason why, centuries later, anytime a blind mob attempts to publicly destroy an individual without concrete evidence, we call it a witch hunt.